My name is Dr. Susanna Dodgson. I am the Director of the Biomedical Writing Programs at the University of Sciences in Philadelphia, and I'm Professor of Biomedical Writing. I'm an academic scientist. I have a Doctor of Philosophy in Physiology. We're the only academic Master of Science program in biomedical writing in the world. We're completely unique. So we're absolutely starting a new profession. There are two different types of medical writers. There's the regulatory writers who are putting together documents for the Food and Drug Administration and for other regulatory agencies in other countries. And there's also publications, medical writers, and we actually have certificates in both. Regulatory writers work either directly for drug companies or else they work for contract research organizations, which are companies hired by drug companies to put together marketing applications for new drugs. So whether you're hired directly by a drug company or by a contract research organization, you're definitely hired by the pharmaceutical industry. Publications writing involves putting together medical manuscripts. It also means putting together educational material, CME, continuing medical education, posters and abstracts for major medical meetings. You're either hired directly by a pharmaceutical company or else you're hired by an advertising company or a medical communications company. For regulatory writing, someone has to do it. And no one's claiming that anyone else is doing it other than medical writers. So this, and for that reason I really like regulatory writing. Most medical writing is done by huge committees. If you're putting together an application for the Food and Drug Administration, you're probably one of 5-10 writers, statisticians, programmers. It's just an enormous, and clinicians, it's just an enormous team effort. The problem that we have is who the people are picked, who are supposed to have done it, and when the medical writers aren't picked. Are we hard flax? I don't know. We're scientists. One thing is I've never seen anything unethical myself. I've never been told to do something that I haven't agreed to. But we tell our medical writers that if ever that happens, you walk away. Publication planning is fairly complicated because what you have to do is you have to figure out when a drug is coming out or something like that, or an indication is being approved. So what you have to do is you have to put together continuing medical education information for physician audiences. You have to hit all the major professional meetings. For example, the American Heart Association, cardiology meetings. So anything to do with heart and cardiology and cardiovascular, if it was a cardiovascular drug. So in a year, perhaps 3 or 4 major publications, 15, 20, 30 posters and abstracts, and the cost of that would probably be around $3 million. So generally it would be a medical communications company that does that, and then they'd go around looking for medical writers to fulfill all of these parts. I know when I was working on HIV/AIDS, there was, I have to be really careful here, there was one person who was an expert in the world on co-infection of hepatitis C and HIV/AIDS. And every conference I went to, and I went to a lot as a medical writer to help write the PowerPoint presentations and to write conference summaries. And I probably went to about 5 or 6 in one year. And this man was at every one of these conferences. And he also miraculously managed to run a clinic and produce 70 papers that year, which I thought was terrific, since English was not his first language. The named authors can be any kind of healthcare professional. Can be a nurse, a pharmacist, physician, even a PhD in a particular field. or a statistician. It really depends on what the paper is. The problem with plagiarism is that it's a no-lose situation. The person who sticks his name on it, he gets a paper. And then what happens? Then he gets promoted. And he gets grants because he's an expert. No one ever is telling them not to do this. And it's not even considered by pharmaceutical companies, by hospitals, by universities. It's not even considered unethical by them. I like the idea, and I broached this with my university, of having any paper that came through our institution would have to go through an institutional review board. This, of course, would not be attractive to institutions either, because if you have someone on your faculty who's producing papers, whether or not they wrote them or not, they're pulling in grants, they're pulling in money into the institution, so there's no reason for an institution to go along with this. So often a medical writer will put together the information for pharmaceutical representatives, and I've done that. I did that for a diabetes drug. Now, are we aware of these egregious claims on television advertising? Absolutely. And in fact, this is one thing we discuss in our classes. Just watching television for 2 nights and pointing out all the medical ads that are breaking laws. And this is part of the problem with the Food and Drug Administration. They just don't have the money and the personnel to be able to police everyone. We would like medical writers to be more involved in advertising because I think it would be more honest. There aren't really terribly many of us. We have one professional society called the American Medical Writers Association. In order to join the American Medical Writers Association, you just have to pay the dues. They say it on their website. Anyone who thinks they're a medical writer is one. We're trying, in our program, we're trying to tighten up a definition of a medical writer. But we've only had about 50 graduates so far. Our program has only been going for 10 years. Most medical writers, except for people who are coming through our program, they just front up to some pharmaceutical company or advertising company or medical communications company and say, I'm a medical writer, hire me. There are far more jobs for medical writers than there are medical writers. In order to be a medical writer, you have to be incredibly good at data, you have to be incredibly good at science, and you also have to be an incredibly good writer. Most of medical writing is just processing large amounts of data into something that's palatable. One thing that's very attractive for a lot of medical writers is to work freelance. So they're working at home. Medical writers are mostly women. It used to be around 95%. One thing I'm finding in the program is, as the word gets out that medical writing is very well paid, we're getting more and more males into our program. And now it's about 20% male as opposed to 5%. I'm a member of the National Writers Union, and it was always very interesting to me. At National Writers Union meetings, we'd show up in a hall by bus and we'd drink water. But for medical writing meetings, everyone would show up in their BMWs and their Mercedes, and we'd have a very nice dinner in a hotel. A competent medical writer certainly can make $100,000, $200,000 a year. No question about that. I think it's a great thing to have professionals who know how to convert data into forms that people can read. I think that's enormously helpful. The problem that I have is the lack of transparency. If you're going to have authors on a paper, and it's not quite clear who the author should be because it's been done by a committee of 20 or 30 people, I think no one should be an author. Or else it should be some group, or else it should be the pharmaceutical company. But to randomly put healthcare professionals on as authors, especially healthcare professionals who have not been involved in creating the study or analysing the data, I think that's appalling. And I don't think that helps the pharmaceutical industry in the long run. We really see ourselves as scientists, and translating data, not translating fairy stories.